Hello, good evening. My name is Mr. Ali, your host for The Real Story. Thank you for joining us. And today we have a very topical topic that we are going to be addressing. And in order for me to do justice to the topic in the short space that we have here, I have none other than my good friend and colleague, Mr. Tariq Khan, to come and dissect that issue. Please say hello to the viewers and the listeners.
It's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you very much for inviting me. And hello to everyone.
Thank you, Tariq. I think it is a rather somber and, should we say, a tragic moment that we are now discussing this particular topic. It has once again resurfaced this weekend just gone, where a young lad by the name of Sudesh Aman, someone of a Sri Lankan background, went only released a week ago, went on a bit of a frenzied attack on the high street in Streatham, London. And I suppose what we are trying to get to is the root cause of why young Muslims and young people generally are now taking terrorism in order to air their grievances, and that's the topic that we are going to be addressing. And it wasn't too long ago when we also had Usman Khan, who did a very similar thing in the London Bridge attack. So it is a wide range question that we are going to be putting out there, and we don't have all the answers, but it is an far too important topic for us as a community not to be putting out there and not to be discussing. So the question that we are trying to ask is, why do young Muslims, should we say, if we're talking about Islamic terrorism in this particular instance, but we at the same time do realize there is right-wing extremism, there is many forms of extremism, but in this particular context I want to just focus on, if we can, on Islamic terrorism, if we may. So, there's a lot of reasons why young people have previously stated that they have taken to terrorism as they couldn't think of anything else in order to challenge their frustrations and some of the injustices they see across the Middle East and South Asia. But still, that doesn't give them any justification for their attacks. But Tariq, you are a member of the community as well, and you've heard the fact that the foreign policy, the injustices, the lack of opportunities, the fact that the media is against Muslims as not justification but a reason as to why young people take up terrorism. But what are your thoughts about some of those reasons, and is there anything else that you've heard with your contacts as to why people take up this particular path?
Yeah, I mean, you've summarized it really well from the start. I mean, first of all, sympathies to those families affected.
Absolutely.
The last couple of incidents that have happened, the recent one, and you mentioned the one, I think leading up to Christmas, that happened in London. And they're isolated cases in themselves, but at the same time, I think it's about, like what we said, it's about understanding why this is happening, what the causes are behind that.
That's right.
Who is behind that? What is in terms of their thinking about what they're doing and why they're doing what they're doing. So it's very complicated from that perspective. But one thing you did mention about about Muslim extremism, and you did touch on the point about the right wing. And I think what we've got to understand from the answer, my own belief is, when you have these isolated cases, or even if they're linked, that you should not stereotype one community.
Absolutely.
One community should not be stereotyped.
Absolutely.
And the thing is, that is the biggest detrimental thing to do, because what we want to do, we want to approach this in a unified way, not in a divisive way, because we can become divisive. I mean, Brexit is an example in itself, how the country was divisive. And over the last, 2020, 19 years since the Twin Towers, this has been ongoing in terms of cases, one after another, and communities being tarnished. And I'm a believer in working together, working in partnership, just like yourself, Mr. Ali, working in partnership with communities and being cohesive. Rather than being, like I said, divisive. So from my perspective, our community leaders are very instrumental in this. Whether they're politicians, whether they're religious leaders, or just the average man on the street, just like myself and you, to be honest with you. You know, what can we bring to the table and how can we actually counterattack this?
Absolutely, well said, Tariq. And I think I want to sort of bring it back to, I think this is where also the media has a big role to play, because they are very good at beating the drum and causing a real stir in the community. And before you know it, people start seeing each other for their differences rather than stuff that actually unites us. And with regards to also self-appointed leaders, you know, whether the religious, whether the politicians, whether the community leaders, unfortunately, I think as a community, I think we have been let down by these individuals, and also maybe to some extent by the MCB, the Muslim Council of Britain, who have not really had a cohesive strategy of actually addressing some of the issues that are affecting our young people, and for them to be for radicalized. And one thing I think is worth putting out there is, because most people have this perception that radicalization happens in mosques, and I think it's worth pointing out that it is the online grooming and radicalization that is the root cause of this, rather than anything that happens in mosques. I think mosques now have very strict controls and are very compliant about their roles and responsibility. So these individuals have been called out, have been isolated, but that doesn't mean now that there is stuff and propaganda material online that they can't access. So for me, I think the government has a very important role to play in order to limit the amount of stuff that is on social media and online, and getting these some of these big billionaire companies to do more.
I agree totally. And on that point, you mentioned agencies. We mentioned the government. So the agencies such as the police, to your point, it's easy to say, oh, he used to go to this mosque, or she used to go to that mosque, or he used to go to that church, or that church. Yeah, the thing is, it's not just about that. It's about that collaboration piece. And the thing is, from my perspective, agencies such as the police and other sectors have been working with the mosques, haven't they, religious institutions, and legislation has changed, laws have changed, and it's more, from my understanding too, it's a bit more collaborative. Yes, you get isolated organisations or cases where you might pick up and say, no, you know what, the measures are not in place, and you have to clamp down on that. And you know, whether that's a mosque, whether it's a church, whether it's a synagogue, irrespective of what religion you're from, what faith, you need to clamp down on that, because nobody wants to see incidents like this in this country or any other country. And you know what, you get apart from the extremism here, you get and you mentioned the right-wing groups too. I mean, that in itself is a movement. Again, that is detrimental to, and I'm not moving away from the extremism cases here, but that's just as bad as this. And you know, exactly. And you need to root out the evil from top to bottom, or bottom up, basically, as to what's going on.
So almost the two fringe extremist elements on the right and the left, and you know, included in that is the right-wing extremism, Islamic extremism, and other types of extremism, is getting more and more fraction now, more and more extreme. And I think also, you know, we talked about Twitter, we talked about, you know, lobby groups such as Henry Jackson Society. We also have Quilliam Foundation as well, and I think these are, you know, lobby groups are doing their utmost best to again isolate one group, and we all know what happened, especially in the 70s and 80s, when the Irish community were labelled and segregated completely, that they actually, instead of actually feeling part of the society, they feel as though that they are, you know, like lepers, they're sort of isolated, they don't belong. And that is the last thing we want to do, because then that feeds a narrative of these terrorism, that, you know, that they've got an agenda against you know, against Muslims, and we should do jihad, and we should sort of fight back, and we have to maintain that Britain and the average person on the streets of the UK is a loving, respectable person who doesn't see colour and embraces everyone within the UK.
I mean, apart from the weather. Apart from the weather, but you know what? The UK is a fantastic place to live.
Beautiful.
Everyone wants to come to the UK. Not because just me and yourself and me were born here, but everyone I know would love to be part of the UK, even if we are out of the Union now. So, but the European Union. But the thing is, it's a fantastic place, and we should be all unified in this approach. And we should, as I said, root this evil out. And the thing is, what disappoints me most though is, and maybe I might get one or two people saying to me, oh, you're a bit of a hypocrite on here, because as an ex-politician too, that our politicians could play a bigger role. Yeah, I really think that they could play a bigger role in terms of challenging the government even more, to do even more. And that's irrespective of being whether you're a Labour, Conservative, Liberal politician. The thing is, we could play a bigger role. And you know what, the other thing is, media will say one thing, the government will say one thing, and at the local level people will have their own say. And I think that again is a unified approach. It may seem easy in practical terms, but it isn't. But it's about Mr. Johnson saying something else. Oh, I'm going to change this legislation. Media saying, oh, you can't just do this overnight. Yeah, it's about being practical, being logistic, being sensible in your approach. And we all want to get to the same destination. Absolutely. Yeah, we want the same goal, but it's about sitting around the table. It doesn't have to be 10, 15 people. It could be 5, 6 stakeholders.
Yes, that's right.
And the guys who are the doers, the implementers, as we both know.
That's right.
It's about the doing and the implementing of that strategy.
Absolutely. No, well said, Tariq. The thing that I want to bring the conversation back to is every so often we have certain individuals that will call out our Muslim leaders and say, look, why are they not condemning this particular terrorist act? Why are they not apologizing for this terrorist act? And sometimes you're thinking, how many times as a Muslim community do we need to be on the defensive and apologize, or do we own this and keep on apologizing? Because on the one hand you're thinking, the terrorism, for example, Islamic terrorism, they may think that they're doing it in the name of Islam, but we know that Islam does not condone this. It is absolutely, clear in the Quran and the Hadith that this is not, if you kill one person, you're killing the whole of humanity. So for these individuals who may have the wrong end of the stick with regards to Islam, they may have mental health issues, whatever they may be, do you think as a community we need to own this and apologize for every terrorist attack? Or do we say, look, they don't represent us and we don't need to apologize for what they've done?
I think that final point that you just made, they do not represent us. Absolutely. Yeah, and like I said, irrespective, again, I know we're talking about terrorism, about a certain community, a Muslim community, but irrespective what community, again, what background, we should not be apologizing for these individuals. Yeah, the thing is, they've committed a huge crime. They should be basically serving sentence or punishment or whatever such that they do. And on the last 2 cases that it's been they were shut down. Yeah, so basically that was a scenario in itself. But I don't think we should be apologizing on their behalf, because for me it's about standing up, as I said earlier on, and it goes back to the point, why are they doing what they're doing? Finding out that it's about these guys that came out basically were in prison.
That's right.
And the thing is, it's about now, and I do believe that in prison, there needs to be more awareness in terms of why, understanding them as individuals. Yeah, that the thing is, why they're doing what they're doing. Yeah, who's behind it, and finding out more. Yeah, rather than just. I'm no way informed am I saying which government or opposition is right, but my own view is that it's about exploring that deeper before that person is let out. Onto the streets again. And we've seen a couple of scenarios now as to what's happened, and like I said, there would have been isolated cases, but I don't think not at all did they represent the community.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point that you make, and I want to steer the conversation towards something that is a breeding ground for people to be even more extremist, or for people to become even more clever thieves, burglars and criminals, which is our prisons. You may go into a prison as a small petty thief. By the time you come out, you're a hardened criminal. And the same can be said with terrorism as well. People go in there, and because they are mixing with people that are on the fringes, are with more extreme views, they are coming out, and within a short space of time we've now had a couple of incidences where they've actually carried out attacks. And now, as always, there is a bit of a knee-jerk reaction by the government due to the reaction by the wider public. as to why aren't these people being rehabilitated whilst they're in prison. If they haven't been, why are they being then paroled at halfway through their sentence? And for me, the fact that they haven't been rehabilitated and let go halfway through the stage, that is a real aberration from the parole system and the prison service. And the fact that all they want to do is now move that goalpost from half the sentence to 2/3. And for me, if the person still is having any kind of extremist view, let them serve their full sentence, and if not, extend that. It should be absolutely clear-cut. So I don't know why, the government at the moment are doing a bit of a PR service by just moving the goalpost from half the sentence to 2/3. But in terms of rehabilitation, I suppose that has been a real failure, is the fact that these people, whilst they have been in prison, haven't been rehabilitated. And I suppose then the wider question is, can these people with such views be rehabilitated, or is it such staunch and integral view of who they are, what they are, that they can't be then sort of de-radicalized?
You know what, like we said, we haven't got the solution. We can give our opinions and be interesting what the viewers out there think too. But it is a knee-jerk reaction to what they're doing. And you know what, me and you do have our differences at times, but the thing is, I agree with you totally, and I think I said that in my own words too, that you know what, it's one way or the other. The thing is, you can't have, like you just said, goalpost dithering, from, this is a sentence to this is a sentence. It's got to be full, understanding the whole situation, and if you're not confident enough to let that person out, then don't let them out.
That's right.
That rehabilitation is important. That understanding the behavior of that person, understanding where they're coming from, because you know what, and I'm not a psychologist or in that field. I wouldn't know. But the thing is, like I said, it's easy to sit here and say what I think, just like a lot of people have got opinions. But at this moment in time, I think there is a knee-jerk reaction from the government, and it's to please people. We're doing something about it. We got to take some action. It's great to take action. We have to take action on this, and to eradicate it, if I may use that word, eradicate or minimize this as much as possible, this root evil that we have. But like I say, it's understanding the whole situation.
We were talking about de-radicalization, and for me, I suppose the key question is, we've had now statements from the family saying that, when they were growing up, they were lovely kids, really had bright futures, but all of a sudden, by just, having a sort of major incident in their life, whether it was, getting arrested or, hanging around with a bad crowd, they started going down that slippery slope. So no one is born bad. Everyone, has, a loving sort of feeling about them, a humanitarian feeling about them. At some point, they do sort of take down this sort of radicalization path. So if they can be radicalized, and I personally see there's no reason why they can't be de-radicalized with the right experts, with the right support there, with the religious scholars also being involved, because if they are using or misinterpreting the quotes from the religious books, then that can be then put into context by a religious expert saying, look, it's clearly stated in black and white that you cannot do this, you cannot do that. So whatever warped idea they may have gained from the online or from a individual, that can be sort of mitigated by a particular expert. What are your thoughts about that? Because I know we've had, I'm not going to name any individuals, but we've had people that were radicalized and now they become secular, and these are the very same people now. So they've actually sort of migrated, if you can say, they've transitioned, and they are the very same people that are saying that once you become de-radicalized, you can never be once you become radicalized, you can never be de-radicalized, which I think is a bit of a sort of a double standard approach, really.
I think a lot of it goes back to also, we talked about the family, in terms of, the mother was talking that she was traumatized by what happened and her son dying. But I think also it stems from the upbringing, what's happening in the environment. Yes. And you know what, I mean, we don't know what the situation of this chap was at home. And the thing is, the mother was saying he was a wonderful child and all that. And one of his friends came on television and said that he was a great guy. He was quiet at school. Absolutely. And this and that. But it was, sometimes you got to call it. Yeah, if you notice behaviors, changing behaviors, changing moods, that it's a responsibility of you as parents. Nobody wants to say, my child is going to commit this crime or commit this or commit that. And the thing is, you have to call it. Otherwise, you are going to get that, and in this case, you can see when the mother was saying that, my child is fantastic or whatever. And the thing is, but I think you have to call it as family too sometimes. But it's you want to protect. You want to protect your children too. It's natural as human beings, as parents we are. But sometimes you've got to be brave and take that approach. And I think from that perspective, the radicalization, in terms of, like I said before, it could be anywhere. It might not be necessarily in a mosque. Yeah, it could be elsewhere. It could be other individuals that that might be at the top of the tree, but we don't know who they are. And these guys are doing what they're instructing them to do. So, and that's what makes it. It's about connecting the dots, isn't it? Absolutely. The thing is that what they work. People seem to sometimes, I say, work in cells. It's like cells, and the thing is, but you cannot identify where that extremism or that radicalization has actually come from.
I think that brings me nicely into what you just said now, that in terms of if you see any kind of signal that there's been a change of behavior, the son or daughter is coming late at night, he's got some new friends,
of course.
All these sort of things, then that's something that you would report. And I think now the word prevent is obviously is the official Home Office's program in order to monitor, to report and to rehabilitate and sort of de-radicalize individuals, and that has a mechanism where there's an expectation for our religious scholars to report on their congregation, for teachers to report on their pupils, for doctors to report on their patients. And the question is, are these individuals I've just mentioned, are they capable, are they trained, are they experienced enough to know what is radicalization or not, and are they equipped to do that? Because once they do, then there's going to be a real breach of trust with that, with their sort of stakeholders, should we say, with their network, and they may be reporting the wrong things, and there's been a bit of a backlash from these individuals, some of the civil servants, as to that, that's not their responsibility, that's not what they've signed up to. So I don't know, so widening up the conversation to prevent, some people from the Muslim community have said this is, a defunct program, it's lost all credibility and it's become toxic. So if I was to say the word prevent, what sort of words or what have you heard from grassroots?
Prevent. I look at it as prevent and proactivity.
Yes.
Yeah, taking a proactive approach.
Yes.
Again, those institutions that you mentioned, whether it's religious, education, what else did you mention? Yeah, so religious and education institutions, for example, where they come across a lot of youngsters, teenagers, and but you have to be careful. Like you just said, you have to be careful because you don't want to get anyone innocent into trouble. And there's been historically over the last 20 years, there's been cases where certain people have been accused and basically they were innocent in the process. But on the flip side, the thing is, those cases where they didn't actually, those cases didn't come to the forefront, and then they get the blame in terms of those organizations. Oh, why didn't you see this? Why didn't you see a change in behavior?
Yes.
Yeah, and that individual was taking this action, but it wasn't reported. So I think they're in a difficult situation because on one side you got parents, you got families, you got local people.
That's right.
And the other side, you have the authorities that you want to work with, and basically you want to give them information about certain cases. So it's but you have to be, it's very difficult, but you have to be sensible in your approach with regards to that. Know the facts. You have to have the facts before you actually report that individual or that incident that's occurring. Yeah.
That's key, you know.
And they're not experts, you're right, because the thing is, some of these guys are not experts. These professionals are not experts in that area in terms of, you know, diagnosing or, you know, seeing those signs. Yeah, it's like sometimes your gut instinct, you know, you're following that, or you're seeing one or two traits. Absolutely. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that person is actually there. It's about, I suppose, it's about knowing the facts, like I said.
And I think this is what I want to sort of also focus on is a lot of emphasis is put on to so-called experts in order that they are given the responsibility to either identify, to diagnose, or to deal with the situation that we find. And I think, you know, finding these days, you know, you uplift a stone and you will find an expert. You know, everyone's an expert now. You know,
everyone's got an opinion. And everyone's an expert.
And unfortunately, this is far too much of an important issue for us to give over the reins over to individuals that are out of their depth. So in terms of what makes an expert, so for me, if anyone would deem be an expert, would be someone who's got real credibility about the particular they're sort of chosen of topic, and they have great experience and knowledge within that particular sphere. But for me, the main thing is that they've got respect from the grassroots level. So if you are sort of working with young people, if you are working with, for example, the Muslim community, there has to be trust and credibility there. You know, you can't bring in someone from, you know, from afar and say, look, I'm going to now talk to them about de-radicalization, or, you know, what Islam says or what they don't say. So for there to be a real ownership and accountability, I think the government and the Home Office needs to really come to the ground and speak to people who deal with young people and get a real consensus of what's going on. And unfortunately, in my experience, because, you know, as you know, I run a football academy as well, when you deal with some of these individuals from the Home Office, they all only want to hear the positives.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and when you give them the stark truth, they don't want to engage with you.
No.
You know, they'll say, no, I've got to give positive feedback because the fact that, you know, funding is at stake, and we're talking about, you know, hundreds of millions of pounds that have been invested into this program, and in terms of outcomes and if you tangible benefits of that, I think you can count it on sort of one hand.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned points around funding and facilities. Yes, there is a lack of that, and we can blame every government, you know, we can go round and round.
Yes.
But there is a lack out there, definitely. Some areas will inherit more than others. Obviously depends on unemployment, deprivation, those factors, as we know. And you also mentioned the point around some of the experts. And the thing is, you know, the experts like these, you got psychologists, and you've got people from psychiatry, social care, and these guys need to be at the forefront of this. Absolutely, they need to be at the forefront of this. And I think the engagement needs to also come from you know, the organizations that we spoke around, whether it's education, the religious organizations. And I mean, I honestly, I don't know whether there are bodies that are set up in terms of that, in terms of those individuals coming from that. Like I said before, you don't need 10, 15 people.
No.
Yeah, you need about 5 or 6 stakeholders that can actually come into the community, have those conversations. But at the same time, it goes back to the point, the funding and facilities make a lot of difference. Like you, Jabzeh, it's fantastic. You know, you've got about 150, 200 youngsters in that. Now they're just distracted totally.
Absolutely.
Their focus is, we want to play sports. Yeah, after school we want to play sports, and I think we need more and more of that. And but you're still going to get, I still believe you're still going to get isolated cases. But as I said from the onset, that this should not be this one community should not be tarnished on the back of that individual's actions. Yeah, and we do not in any way or form condemn that. We condemn that actually. And the thing is, we condemn that totally, and that's how it should be approached. That we keep working with the appropriate stakeholders, the agencies, and try and get more and more funding. And that funding we have to get in terms of how voice our opinions to our political leaders. So they have a massive role to play, whether they're MPs or councillors. So they have a massive role to play in this too.
Absolutely, and I think I want to sort of touch on the bit about the hostile environment that we are living in. Over the last 12 months, there has been an increase in 8% of anti-Semitic attacks. There has been an increase in 19% on anti-Muslim attacks in the last 12 months. So you can see where the trend is going. I suppose we have to look at as to the reasons why. Is it because of Brexit? Is it because of what's happening around Middle East and sort of the foreign policy? For me, I don't know whether foreign policy is just a too much of an easy option for people to sort of justify their actions and so forth. But how much, because I know one of the Labour deputy leadership candidates has today sort of said that, for me, I'm going to have a foreign policy where unless we are directly attacked, we are not going to engage in any more foreign wars, and that will then reduce the risk that we have here in the UK. It's a tough argument, that is. How much do you think the fact that the recent sort of wars that we had in Iraq, Syria, and also Libya has played in some of the attacks here, or is that just something that we use as an excuse for people to carry out their attacks?
There should be no excuse. Nobody should be doing. In the first place, nobody should be doing this. Taking this kind of a negative action against any individual or a country, or even a community.
Yes.
And we can dispel that from the onset, that anyone should be doing that. And in terms of your point around the Middle East, and I mentioned it in the point earlier on about 2001. The Twin Towers.
Absolutely.
So I feel that that's where a lot of it started in terms of this massive divide between the international community in terms of what happened with that, and that did not help the cause.
No.
But at the same time, as I said, then you had the London terror attack, and all the other isolated incidents that followed that, the bombings, London bombings, wasn't it, in July 7th?
That's right.
I can't remember the year, and then all these leading up to one after the other, and there's no excuse at all. Nobody should be doing this.
Yes.
There's no reason to do it.
Yes.
To be honest with you, and Middle East, we know we sympathise with what's happening there. In the Middle East, we have to sympathise, and we hope that one day that will get sorted out too. That massive conflict there, all those innocent people dying, over politicians, fighting their own war.
Yes.
And but there's no reason for anyone to take the law into their own hands, to be honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely. We have the rule of law here, and we should sort of abide by that. And I suppose I want to sort of just again come to as to whether there are any other reasons apart from foreign policy, apart from being groomed online, where young people may be exposed to sort of taking that this is the only option that they have. Because one thing that I am seeing is that now the public and the government is almost treating Muslims as a unique group, because they are now creating laws that are specific for, not for Muslims I would say, but for terrorism, knowing that by and large that it is young Muslims that are sort of taking part of that particular crime, and at the moment is a bit of a big ticket item to sort of be seen to be tough tackling that. So now they're saying that without any real consultation, they're going to just increase the sentence from half the sentence to 2/3. They're going to stop parole from anyone that may be seen to be still having sort of radical extremist views, whereas that's not being done for any other crime, for murder, for rape, for other serious crimes as well. So for me, I think whoever does, these sort of say very difficult and very sort of dangerous crimes, they all should be treated with the same brush, really.
Absolutely, it should be consistency.
Absolutely.
Consistency across the board. These legislation laws should apply to everyone.
Absolutely.
And like we say, irrespective of what community you're from, it doesn't matter you're black, brown, white, pink, whatever. And it should be consistency. And I get disappointed actually when the government start saying, dividing one and having that one rule for one rule for another. We are all equal.
Absolutely.
We all live here.
Absolutely.
This is our country.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the thing is, we should live in harmony. We should respect each other, respect each other's faiths, each other's backgrounds, celebrate together. Absolutely. And be unified. And I think, and the government, it all stems from the leadership. The thing is, when the leadership are saying one thing, and that's what people tend to follow, and then the media, as we said, have a massive part to play in this too. They can be really positive. They should be really positive at times. So that concerns me at times when like you said, the stereotypical image. And 90% of the population, 95% of that community are not like that. It may be 1 or 2%, and that's where it becomes even more divisive. That's what happens.
I think that's a great way to end the show, really.
Thank you.
A real message of hope, the fact that there's more that unites us than divides us, and that we can only succeed and beat this if we stay together rather than us to start looking inwards and start fighting. So I hope you found the discussion useful, albeit within half an hour we tried to discuss this mammoth task in a short period of time. Hopefully it gives you a bit of an appetizer of what's to come, because in the next show we will have an expert that is credible, that is trusted, and that has a respect on the ground to add a lot more context to the show. But for me, I think it is something that as a community, I'm just talking about now the Muslim community, that we own and embrace and make sure that we sort of get rid of this internally and make sure that it's not used as a stick from other communities and should we say interested parties that have anti-Muslims, anti-hate hate brigade, to sort of use that as a stick to beat us. So on that note, I hope you've enjoyed the show, you've found something from it, and in a few weeks' time we will dedicate a whole hour when we have an expert with us. Thank you for joining us. This has been a real show with Mr. Ali and also my co-host, Mr. Tariq Khan, and we will look forward to seeing you again this time next week. Thank you.